Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this CTE inspired session. Savvy sequencing, maximizing your culinary arts budget. My name is Joel Cassidy. I'm a 9-year teacher of culinary arts down in Deep East Texas. I teach in Cold Spring Oakhurst Consolidated Independent School District. Say that 5 times fast. And I've been here at our new facility for 2 years. So kind of 2 years, there's a pandemic there in the middle, but without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started because I want to make sure that you get all that you can out of this 20 minutes. We will have a 10-minute chat at the end, so be sure to drop any questions into the chat box as we go through this, and we'll try to get to all of those in our Q&A here at the end. Today, we're going to talk about maximizing your supply budget. As our classes get larger, our budgets tend to get smaller for some reason. So we want to look at maximizing that budget, providing a lab-based scope and sequence for introductory culinary classes, and then presenting it in a logical order of learning concepts. That's where your money is going to be best spent, by that logical order. Throughout the presentation, there are recipes that I will reference. If they have a star by them, I'm going to actually provide those to you guys in a folder or a link that's going to be on the home page of this session. So let's get started. I'm actually going to start in day 1 and let you know what my first week of school looks like. Sometimes a 3-day week, sometimes a 5-day week. You can condense some of this, get rid of some of it. I find value in it, but maybe you don't. That's okay. But we do get to know you activities and pass out some paperwork on the first day. I don't even talk about the paperwork. I just say, here this is. You need to bring it back tomorrow. The first test of responsibility is, can you bring it back? But do get to know you activities, because it drives me insane when I get to the last grading period of school and a kid is like, hey, that girl over there in my group, well, she has a name, and the fact that you don't know it is really sad to me. So we work on get to know you activities, get to know you games, and we'll talk about our syllabus on day 2. We also start doing some team building games, and we'll do more of those on day 3, because guess what? One of my standards is teamwork. So I'm already working on standards on the 2nd day of school. So I think that's pretty great that we have the flexibility to do that in career tech classes. The 3rd day, we talk about classroom expectations, and then we hit the ground running. For day 4, sometimes that's the first week of school, sometimes it's the 2nd, depends on how your calendar is set up. But we do a quick lab tour, some general lab expectations, because we're really going to delve into those in the next weeks. And then the last day, which is really the first day of real instruction, we start Serve Safe with chapter 1, keeping food safe. And we're going to thread that all the way through our first semester. And I usually give my Serve Safe test that break between Thanksgiving and Christmas, where we're in class for like 4 or 5 weeks. I usually give the Serve Safe food handler certification test during that time. We'll move straight from chapter 1 on into chapter 2, but that's a little more hands-on. We'll do hand washing demonstrations. I'll do hand washing practice with them, where they go and they practice, and we use GlowGerm. It is pretty budget friendly, but if you cannot afford GlowGerm, or maybe your district won't buy that because maybe they're not a vendor or whatever reason, you can use glue with fine glitter. Because we know that if you can get glitter off of yourself, then that is a feat that is one to be practiced. And then also Karo syrup with food coloring is another one. It's inexpensive to be able to do that as well. So that's kind of a best, better, good scenario for you for hand washing. We then go into tools and equipment. We're going to show photos of the equipment. Or the tools. The kids guess the items. They write down what they think they're called. Like they'll say scissors. Well, actually, the terminology is kitchen shears or meat shears. So we do that, give the actual terminology, explain the uses, and then have a lab practical where I'll pull 30 items out of the closet and out of the drawers, put them out on the tables, and the kids will rotate through them. I usually do them in groups of 3, the items, not the kids, but they rotate through and write down what all of those items are. So it's more like an anatomy and physiology identification practical where they would identify bones, but we do it with kitchen tools and equipment. We also then work on kitchen safety. We talk about slips, trips, and falls, ID problem areas in our kitchen, like the dish area, the area around the stoves, any corners that we may be walking around with the sharp objects. We talk about verbal communication and the correct terminology to use. Then we go into first aid. We talk about basic wound care for cuts. We talk about burn care. We demonstrate how to actually properly care for some different wounds of different levels. Knife safety. We walk around with a knife. We talk about verbal commands. We pretend we have knives. We don't just actually just run around the kitchen with knives. But we talk about hand grips and positions when we're using a knife, how to store the knife when we're not using it when it's on our table versus the actual storage area, how to wash and clean that to make sure that our knives are properly cared for. Then we'll do measurements, equivalents, and conversions. And this is when we're gearing up for our labs. This is where we're going to first start to buy our ingredients for this. We'll go over our units. We'll do calculations, conversions. I take it old school. I do the gallon man, but I make my students think outside the box, use higher order thinking skills, and to reimagine the gallon man into different objects. I then will demonstrate the difference in weight and volume using common ingredients. So I show how to properly measure out those dry ingredients, how to properly measure out liquid ingredients. And I'm going to use ingredients that I'll use later in the year, like flour, sugar, brown sugar, chocolate chips. All of those are going to be coming up in different labs. So I'm going to go and purchase those now and be able to use them later. And then I'll have the students with those ingredients practice measuring. Now, when you do this, make sure that you use some gloves because some of these are ready to eat food. And if we want to continue to be able to use those, we want to make sure that they're using proper personal hand hygiene. At this point, we also are going to talk about Chapter 3 in Serve Safe, which has storage involved in it because we're going to open all these ingredients and we're going to need to store them properly. So that's when we work in Chapter 3 of Serve Safe. And then I'm going to do an actual measurement lab where they will have their first real lab. So they're going to eat pancakes, lots of dry ingredients and some liquid ingredients for good measuring reinforcement there. You can keep it cheap and add anything that you already have on hand. So you will have chocolate chips if you purchase those. You will have nuts if you purchase those from that previous lab where the demonstration for measuring is. And you can keep it super cheap with some syrup, or you can add those other items as your budget allows. We'll also make Play-Doh. We save this for use with our knife cuts. One of the tips I have for you with Play-Doh, make sure you use gel food coloring. That decreases the amount of moisture content and allow your Play-Doh to be firmer. And the same thing with flour. You may want to add some additional flour to firm up your dough. So you may want to troubleshoot this dough. The recipe I have works for me, which I am going to include here as well. It doesn't have a star by it. I think it's further in here. Anyway, the next thing we'll do is we'll go over the types of knives, the different uses for each of those types, the parts of the knife. We'll label a diagram, identify those, what each part is used for. And that's as important because whenever I reference that part of the knife, I say, well, you need to use the heel of the knife to cut through this carrot because it's really dense. Then they're not using the tip of the knife. They know where the heel of the knife is. We'll then demonstrate common knife cuts. I will demonstrate on real food. And then we'll do cut practice where I demonstrate on Play-Doh and then they do it. So I'll demonstrate a step and they'll do a step. So I do that with knife cuts with our Play-Doh because it's really forgiving and it takes the pressure of wasting food off of a student at the beginning of their time in culinary arts. I want to make it a safe space for them to mess up. It's okay to mess up sometimes. So if I give them the opportunity to do that and feel okay, then that helps a lot with down the road and trusting them. Besides, if they mess up, they just squish it back together and start over. I usually make them make a potato shape. So give them a definite shape that you want them to make. Otherwise, they're high school students and they may make shapes that you don't really want in your lab. Knife cuts with real food is what follows up the practice with the Play-Doh. They'll cut potatoes. They're cheap, easy to cut. They are easy to store temporarily, so I can put them in water in the refrigerator for 3 to 5 days and they're still good as long as they're covered with cool water. We'll also cut up onions, celery, and carrots. So we know that is mirepoix. I'm going to use that and freeze it later, or freeze it for use later with our stock making unit, which comes up right after this. The recipes that I use for this, I'll make sauteed Southern style sauteed potatoes. So they're just potato cubes with onions, pepper, salt, pepper. And then we'll also make creamy potato soup. This introduces roux making, introduces starch cookery, and is a really good use of those irregular knife cuts because you know what? If those itty bitty pieces of potato break down, that's less roux that I have to add to my soup because all of that starch is already going to be in there, thickening that up with potato. We'll then go over the anatomy of the recipe where I look at the parts of a recipe card and a part of a recipe. We compare conventional or home recipes with standardized recipes versus formulas for baking. We look at doing a recipe comparison lab. This is an optional lab. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. But we just make sugar cookies because they're really simple and inexpensive to make. I'll have one group use a traditional recipe from like Pinterest or from a cookbook or one that I use every year. And then the other group will then take those traditional measured out in cup recipes for the home-based cook, and I'll have them convert those to equivalents. So 1 cup is equivalent to 8 ounces. We all know that yes, but it's that operative word, the yes, but what ingredient is it? Well, we're discovering that, and we can show the importance of making sure that you're measuring and not converting things unless you're using an actual conversion from the book of yields, for instance. So we'll look at the difference in the outcomes of those: texture, appearance, and flavor. Then I move into Serve Safe, chapter 4 and 5. Those are the two most important for cross-contamination prevention and then proper cleaning and sanitizing, because the next unit we're going to do is chicken fabrication. And we know that chicken is a super duper important TCS food that we want to make sure that we keep safe for consumption. We'll use a whole chicken. We learned to fabricate chickens in my class because 1, that's a skill that every chef should know. And 2, it's the biggest bang for your buck. I can spend $4 to $5 on a smaller bird, and I'm going to spend a lot of money up front, but you're going to see that we're going to use the products from this chicken fabrication all throughout the rest of that year. Why? Because we need to practice using a boning knife, and you should not be deboning or fabricating a chicken with a chef knife. You should be using a boning knife. That's what it's for. Industry skills for chefs, that is one of the ones that they'll have you come in and maybe do a stage or a cooking tryout and say, cut this chicken up. That's a chef tool and a skill that you really need to teach students. It also helps prepare them for Skills USA and ProStart contests. A resource that I use is a YouTube video by Steve DeShazo. You can just search it in Google or YouTube, the best chicken fabrication video, and it's the first one that pops up. We'll use those parts. The cooking methods for those, from the carcass, we'll make stock. The breast will either grill or saute it. The legs, that we will braise those. We'll roast the thighs. We'll saute chicken tenderloins when we do our salad unit, and then deep fried wings, because why would you not deep fry those, right? They're so good. The next unit we move into are stocks, where we take a chicken carcass from our chicken fabrication. We take our knife cuts from our mirepoix from our knife cuts that we've already done. So this is basically a free lab because your school district pays for your water anyway. Woo-hoo. So we got to make lots of chicken stock if we have the room to store it. We maximize our production and minimize our costs later down the road by making lots of stock. So the only money that you'll need to spend here is probably just for your aromatics for your sachet. We'll then move into soups. We'll take our base liquid of our chicken stock and make those. We'll make corn chowder. We make pureed soups of butternut squash and vichyssoise, which is a tough soup for students because they want it to be potato soup and they want to warm it up every time. But it is a cold pureed soup, which two things that are kind of foreign to us as Americans, especially if you live in the South. We just don't eat pureed soups or cold soups very often. And then if budget allows, we will do gazpacho as well, which is a uncooked soup that's thickened with breadcrumbs, which again, totally foreign to our students. We'll then move into sauces where we'll make our 5 mother sauces and a secondary sauce for each. I'm not going to go through those because this is going to be provided for you. But I will make these 3 sauces here, and we'll make a secondary and then a tertiary sauce using all of our sauces from previous labs and our stock rather from those previous labs. I will note that I don't make Espanol because I don't make brown stock. And I would not recommend using canned because it is very salty. But if you want to make brown stock, by all means, make brown stock. Hollandaise is one that I will make, but I don't do it with our sauces. I actually do it over next with our breakfast and egg cookery unit. So I'll start out with meats, and bacon is a fan favorite. Sausage, also another favorite, and 2 of the really commonly cooked breakfast meats. We'll do a hot cereal lab where I give them choice and creativity. Sometimes I just give them some ingredients to choose from to make oatmeal or grits, which is a Southern staple of ground white corn, similar to polenta. And then we'll also review the toasting of breads. I will do a unit over eggs that lasts quite a long time because there's a lot of ways to cook eggs to the point where they're like, I don't want any more eggs. But sauteed eggs, we'll make scrambled eggs. Fried, we'll do over easy, medium, hard, and sunny side. We'll do boiled eggs, soft and hard boiled, so we can show them how to properly hard boil an egg so you don't get that green ring around the yolk that you get when they're overcooked or they've been cooked too hot. And then we'll do poached eggs, which is another skill that every good chef should have. We'll make eggs Benedict, which is where we'll also make our hollandaise sauce from that as well. Sometimes I would do a croque madame or croque monsieur. Just kind of depends on where we are in our budget for the year. For our unit exam, we will make a breakfast sandwich. I usually give them some items to choose from. They'll have a choice of bread and how they prepare that. We'll have to prepare a meat or meat substitute, eggs for egg cookery. They'll have to produce one of the eggs that we made, and then a spread or a garnish, and then I judge that on overall flavor and appearance. It's a super fun lab that they look forward to whenever I start to explain it. They're like, oh, we can get down with the breakfast sandwich. Okay. For potatoes, I'll do herb roasted baby potatoes for use of our waxy potatoes. We'll make potatoes au gratin or gratin dauphinois, which is the French term, where I show them how to safely use a mandolin slicer. So you want to maybe grab a knife cut glove if you're going to do that lab with a mandolin. We do deep fried potatoes, so French fries, which demonstrates, I usually make a garlic oil so we can demonstrate how to do that. And then demonstrate the double frying method, which is blanching those fries first, allowing the starch to come out, and then deep frying them for those nice crispy golden potatoes. We'll also do croquette potatoes, which are French style deep fried mashed potato, where we'll also demonstrate the standard breading procedure. We'll bake potatoes. I usually use sweet potatoes. Sometimes I'll do a mashed potato lab, just kind of depends on where we are. And then there's a lot of possibilities, so many possibilities for potatoes. Use what you feel comfortable with and are what your budget allows for. But potatoes, they're like super cheap. Also inexpensive, rice and grains. So we'll make rice versus wild rice versus brown rice. So I'll have a 3-day lab where 3 of my groups will cook one of each of those so they can compare the outcomes and how the difference in the amount of liquid that you need and the amount of time that it takes to properly cook those. If we have a double lab, so if I'm doing this with my advanced classes, we'll make risotto. You just can't hardly make it in a 40-minute lab. It's just so fast and so time consuming. We'll also tend to make quinoa or couscous because those are inexpensive grains as well. When we move into our pasta unit, we make a fresh egg pasta. Lemon basil cream sauce is inexpensive. Burst cherry, tomato, and garlic sauce, easy and inexpensive sauces to make with fresh egg pasta, which is also inexpensive because it's olive oil, eggs, flour, water, and a little bit of salt. And that's it. Spetzel, we'll make brown butter and herb spetzel. And then if I want to tackle gnocchi, if we have potatoes left over, then we'll typically make gnocchi with a tomato cream sauce. And we can use our tomato sauce that we made in our sauce unit from our mother sauce. Vegetable cookery, you can choose to split this in half if you want. Fall vegetables or winter squashes and things, you could do that unit in the fall and then do green vegetables and those summer vegetables in the spring if you want. It's up to you. But green vegetable cookery, I try to do different methods. So we do roasted asparagus, steamed broccoli, and then sauteed green beans. We'll make ratatouille, so stewed vegetables of zucchini, squash, and eggplant. And then we'll make julienne carrots, which is a great way to reinforce some more knife skills, especially ones that they may be using in their Pro Start and their Skills USA contests and FCCLA, because you should be somewhere around the springtime at this point. I also do Brussels sprouts because they're a bit foreign to students and some of them think they don't like them. But you know what? When you cook them with bacon and butter and balsamic vinegar, you can turn some people on to Brussels sprouts. They're pretty good. And then they also do cabbage, where we'll typically make 2 Southern Staples coleslaw and smothered cabbage for our labs for those. The next one we'll do is emulsions. We'll do permanent emulsions and then temporary, where we'll make mayonnaise and ranch dressing. You can address how to repair a broken emulsion because inevitably somebody's mayonnaise will break. So you can show them how to repair that instead of just tossing it in the trash. And then vinaigrettes, I give them some options of vinegars and flavorings, and they are able to make their own vinaigrette based on a kind of a base recipe. And we'll use it when we get to greens, which is coming up next, because the vinaigrette will hold pretty well in the refrigerator for a while. We'll do ID for some different lettuces that we find in spring mix. We'll look at raw versus spinach, cooked spinach. We'll move into salads, where we'll talk about the different types of salads. We'll look at, they will then make their own salad. So it could be a green-based salad, or maybe a pasta salad or a fruit salad, but it should have the components of a salad base, crunchy component, vegetables, protein, which is where I use chicken tenderloins, and then dressing and garnish. The dressing, obviously, from our vinaigrette. Meat cookery. This is where we'll use all of our frozen parts from chicken fabrication. So we'll do sauteed chicken breasts with mushroom pan sauce. Really, the only thing you're buying there is mushrooms. Buffalo wings. We'll do braised chicken legs with tomatoes and garlic, and then we'll do herb roasted chicken thighs. And then that should cover all of your meat that you've cut up from your chicken fabrication. I would invest, I meant to say this earlier, in a vacuum sealer just to be able to save those chickens for longer. Quick breads is the next unit. Sometimes I find myself starting the next year off. It just depends on the year. Sometimes it's crazy, as we all know. So right now we're all just kind of winging it after trying to recover from these last 2 years. But we do the quick breads, 3 mixing methods for that. The creaming method will make chocolate chip cookies or cookies of some kind. The biscuit method will use cranberry chocolate scones. And the recipe I have for you, the chocolate and the cranberry, you can substitute anything, any dried fruits, nuts, candies for those ingredients in those same amounts. We also make buttermilk biscuits, and then we'll do the muffin method with blueberry and lemon muffins. And that brings us kind of to the end with yeast spreads. We'll make focaccia. If you don't have a double period to make yeast spreads, try to find a recipe that works well with a slow rise for a refrigerated overnight rise for you to be able to do your yeast spreads. But if you have the budget left at the end of the year, focaccia art, create your own pizza lab with pizza dough. You can make yeast rolls. And if you're running low on funds or you want to pre-budget for your next year, do a cinnamon roll fundraiser. Sell them. It helps kick off your budget for the next year. If you have an activity account, if you're doing this in the fall, then plan to sell it and deliver them the week before holiday, and more people will be apt to buy those. Also, time it with a pay period. Your teachers will buy it as well. And the last thing as we move into American regional cuisine, and this usually brings me into my second year of their culinary arts classes. I use the textbook called American Regional Cuisine. It's through the International Culinary School at the Art Institute. It's a great book. I don't get a kickback. I don't get anything from that. I did go to this Art Institute for my culinary arts degree, but this book is full of great recipes that we explore traditional dishes and work array around the U.S. And this helps them multiple dishes cooked at the same time for timing and the aesthetics of plating. And that's kind of where we are. So thank you very much. Now we're going to have a quick Q&A session. So we'll look back and get some of those questions from the chat, and feel free to ask more questions in the chat. Let's get to what we can. Thank you, guys.